Hello, everyone. Let's talk about media and communication. Our everyday life is marked by internet use. 96% of the Swiss population is currently using the internet, and on average, Swiss internet users spend around 5.5 hours a day online. However, to be able to use the internet in a beneficial way, users need to be able to develop a certain level of digital skills, and the lack thereof can mean exclusion for a lot of people as we watch the rise of digitization in the private and public spheres. Today, we chat with Kiran Kapppeler from the Department of Communication and Media Research of the University of Zurich to learn how digital skills can be measured and how their association with socioeconomic and psychological factors has changed over time. Hi, Kiran. Welcome to our episode.
Hey,
So, why did you decide to embark on this comprehensive study on digital skills? And did you feel like there was a big research gap on the subject?
yeah, well, actually, together with my team at the University of Zurich, we're doing these surveys on internet use in Switzerland. And what we found generally there is that people are using digital technologies more and more in their everyday lives. So, for instance, for information seeking, but also for entertainment and even for socializing, the importance of these digital tools has grown. And what we know from research on digital inequalities is that for being able to benefit most from your use of digital technologies, skills are actually crucial. So having the digital skills to be able to use the internet in a way that benefits you is very important here.
Of course. You outline in your article three research challenges related to digital skills. So, if you could briefly run through each one and also the main findings in each of these challenges that you outline.
Yeah, definitely. So, first of all, the first research challenge that I identified was connected to measurement of digital skills. So, what we find in many studies is that digital skills, especially in quantitative studies like surveys, are measured through self-reports. So, the researchers ask people to evaluate their own skills. And this can be kind of problematic because we know that there's bias to self-reports. For instance, we know that women judge their skills worse than men, for instance, when they have the same level. So we don't really know if this is a valid measure for digital skills. That was the first challenge. And then what I was also interested in looking at is, first of all, how these skills developed over time, because there's not so much research over time. Most surveys actually just measure skills at one point in time. And then, third of all, I also was interested in the association of digital skills, first of all, with socioeconomic background. So, this digital inequalities questions to see whether social inequalities are reflected in digital skills. And then also to see how digital skills are connected to outcome variables of internet use, like inclusion in the information society. And for both these questions, I was interested in seeing how this actually changed over time.
Mhm. And after the conclusion of this study, how do you hope that these findings and the conclusions that you arrived at can impact public policies, institution, and even civil society regarding digital accessibility and how people can change their internet usage after these findings?
Yeah, so what we found actually was, first of all, that the self-report measure for digital skills is actually a valid measure for digital skills because we compared it with a knowledge-based measure where we ask people to evaluate statements related to datafication and algorithmization, like for instance, that services can tailor their recommendations based to interests that people have. And we asked them to say whether this is right or wrong. And this was then our measure of internet or digital skills. And we saw that these two, the self-report and the knowledge-based measure, correlate. So this has impact, especially for researchers, because this actually shows that we can use self-report measures, especially when we're doing a big survey where we're looking at many different kinds of things. It's actually good to use the self-reports. And then the second implication is more on the maybe on the content level, not so much on the measurement level, so to say, because what we found was that actually the importance of social inequalities in terms of socioeconomic background, so the role that gender, age, education, and income level played for the level of digital skills increased over time. And this is kind of surprising, maybe, that this grew more important over time. And what we also found was that the connection between digital skills and internet usage and social inclusion, or people feeling included in the information society, also grew stronger over time. And here we also saw that overall digital skills were more important for feeling included in the information society than just the time that you're spending on the internet. And that also over time, so since 2011 until 2023, the role of skills actually increased. And for policymakers now, the implication that I would draw from this is that if they want to tackle social inequalities, especially in the digital space, they should actually tackle digital skills, because that's something that can be tackled and that can be promoted, and it has an impact on how included people feel in the socially in the digital society. And that can kind of stop the reproduction of social inequalities there.
Hmm. And while I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but it comes up perfectly right now. So about limitations for your research, you spoke about maybe the self-reporting that's the most widespread available content for analysis is maybe a little biased. You spoke about gender biases. Maybe there are some other factors that make it a little less reliable in that sense. So what would you say were the biggest hurdles for you to get an objective, landscape of the digital skills in your target audience?
Yeah, so for self-reports, there's definitely this problem with bias. But then with the other measure, with the knowledge-based measure, we were trying to kind of formulate statements that would apply on one hand to many people, but then which would also kind of grasps digital skills the best possible. And this was kind of challenging. And for future research, I would probably try to include more statements, make it more diverse, and also include more like current changes in technology, because this is kind of a moving target. It's always changing because the technologies that we're using are changing. So I would constantly update that to reflect these changes as well.
Hmm. And you also said that you found some surprising trends in your analysis. What would you say were the most unexpected results from your work in this field?
Yeah, so there are probably two. So first of all, the level of digital skills itself remained relatively stable when looking at the means and comparing the means across time, which is kind of interesting because I would probably expect the skills to get better over time. But it can also be explained quite convincingly, I think, because what we looked at here was the self-report measure. So we actually asked people, how do you yourself evaluate your skills on a scale from 1 bad to 5 excellent? And this self-report, of course, needs to be understood in the context that is also changing. So 10 years ago, the skills that people needed were very different. It was maybe more about posting something on Facebook, while today it's more about understanding algorithmic recommendations on whatever platform you're using. So this has really changed. So it can be explained also why this remains stable. And then the second thing that was surprising, I alluded a little bit to this already, was that the impact of the socioeconomic background actually was increasing over time. Because when we look at theory about digital inequalities, we would think that with the spread of the technology in the society, these kind of impact factors are getting less important. But what we found is it's actually getting more important. But again, We have new innovations, new technologies coming up. And for these, actually, socioeconomic background does play a big role with regards to digital skills.
It can almost make another completely separate study about the biases of people on how they perceive themselves as, cybernauts.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So we're almost at the end of our conversation, and is a kind of a tradition on our show to ask you. So if someone will just be joining this conversation, and if you had no more than two sentences, how would you summarize this conversation and your work that we're discussing, really, really briefly?
So, first of all, I would say that self-reported skills measures are actually valid measures because they reflect knowledge that people have. And second of all, digital skills are important and they're still connected to digital inequalities, which is why they should actually be promoted in our society today.
Kiran, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your research with us today.
Thank you for the invite.
If you're watching us on YouTube, you can find all the resources and materials of this conversation on the Let's Talk About Media and Communication website. You can also listen to this episode wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to our newsletter, and follow us on Twitter at CogitatioLTA. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.